Yeah, we are live. I think we're live. Yeah, so thank you once again for joining us today and giving us a little time out of your busy schedule. Like this series of webinar discussing topics in DevRel. We've done
Hmm.
how to come into DevRel. That was our first webinar. Then we did a little bit about developer community, and now we want to talk about the job market in DevRel because I know at this point everybody's a little bit scared of the job market, especially for folks in DevRel because the job market has been everywhere since the beginning of the year. So we just want to address some questions surrounding that particular topic. So I have about 12 questions and then I'll shoot and then you can just give me your answers.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So I already know what you do. I've been following your journey right from Spotify to Zeta and to where you currently are. But if you could just give us a brief overview of what you currently do now. And
Yeah. Right now, I'm a developer experience engineer or developer relations engineer at a company called DataStax. And it's DataStax's mission to make AI approachable and applicable for all developers. So that's my role, is to help developers get into and thrive in the field of generative AI.
okay, that sounds awesome. I know AI is like the new wave. Everybody's getting into AI. A lot of people want to know more about AI. Yeah. So my first question here is, what are the current job market trends for DevRel professionals? Like as it is now, what's the hiring like for DevRel, including in terms of salary, in terms of growth, in terms of location, and all of those.
Yeah, it's interesting because the job market right now is just bad. Like, not just for DevRel or engineers, it's just like globally. Um, there's a lot of people losing their jobs and then struggling to find new jobs. So I'd say the job market for DevRel and more is just not the best. Part of it is because of the global economy. Like, there's two wars happening concurrently, and there's all
Yeah.
kinds of disruption. Actually, not two wars, three wars. There's also something happening in Yemen. So there's just
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on that's causing a lot of disruption, right? And on top of that, AI itself is causing a lot of disruption. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk purchased Twitter and laid off, like, I think it was a big percentage of people, and I think that honestly started a trend where a lot of companies are realizing, ah, wait, we can just get rid of people, especially people we don't
Yeah.
need anymore. And
Need.
so
Yeah.
I think that's just a small summary to say that it's not good, I think, at this point in time. Um, in terms of salaries, I don't know. It varies according to location, except some companies don't do that. I think of Cal.com specifically. That's one company that refuses to do location-based pay, and they just pay you, I don't know, some figure. I think it's around $100,000 a year or something, no matter where you live. And this is great because they hire some people like in the United States or so, and these people just can decide they want to go live in somewhere else. They can go live in
Yeah.
like Jamaica or the
Yeah.
Philippines
Where
or
the
wherever
cost
they
of
want.
living is low.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or they just don't like America. Maybe like they like a different place, right? And so like they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about making less money because they move somewhere.
Money.
So
Yeah.
Cal.com does that. But it's rare, I think. There's not a lot of companies that do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So, do you still think, with what you've explained so far, do you still think there's a strong demand for DevRel rules or the market is saturated?
That's a good question. I think there isn't, well, I think defining DevRel is interesting. A lot of companies, what they want is to have their products be in front of a lot of people. And what they want is to have a huge community. And if they're developer focused companies, then what they really want is customers and marketing. And so some companies think, okay, DevRel is the way I can get this. And so it's very difficult because some companies think that's DevRel, but other companies think it's something entirely different. For example, at DataStax, we have customers. And so we have like solutions engineers for them. Um,
Oh,
and, and so DevRel isn't that. In DataStax, DevRel is more aligned with, it's not even really DevRel. I may get in trouble for saying this, but it's more developer marketing, right? It's and part of
okay.
marketing is relationships. Like, you may have heard of CRMs.
Yeah.
customer relationship management
Show
tools.
management. Yeah.
That's so you manage your relationship to your customers. DevRel is a similar thing where like CRM tools are used in marketing, right? To manage
Mm-hmm.
that relationship. And I think DevRel, in data stacks at least, is you have a developer audience that you want to market to, you want to teach to, you want to help, you want to grow a community, um, but it's not the other thing that other companies. So it's very ill defined. I think ultimately, to answer, it's difficult to answer your question because your question is there
Is
room
there
for
still a
DevRel?
strong, yeah, there's still a
Yeah,
strong demand. Like in the early 20s, like 2020, 2021, there was like this DevRel rave everywhere. Everybody was hiring DevRel professionals. So I'm just wondering, like this is 2024, next year 2025. Do you still think there's a strong demand for DevRel professionals?
no, that's the concrete answer. But I think it's because companies are. So I think DevRel as a job title was trending in
Yeah.
2021, 2022. Everybody was like, yes, yes, we definitely need DevRel. But they didn't
Mm-hmm.
stop to think, okay, but what is it? And so because of that, different companies wanted it to be different things. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if DevRel is one thing for sure, is it's very, very expensive. It's
Yeah.
expensive because you sponsor events, you sponsor meetups, you there's travel, it's very expensive
It's
on the
fancy.
one hand, and then on the other hand, it 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 doesn't show any returns in the short term. So you may invest a lot in DevRel, but you only see the results of that investment 5, 8, 9, 10 years down the line, probably, maybe even not, right? And so I think it doesn't have a strong place anymore because a lot of companies are realizing, this is expensive and the short term return just isn't there. It's very hard to measure. Now, in data stacks, we have I mean, it's not just data stacks. Really, it's just a well-known sales technique to have a funnel, a sales funnel, right? You start very wide. It looks like a
Mm-hmm.
funnel, like in real life, like it's a upside down triangle, And
Yeah.
so you start very wide, and that's the top of your funnel. That's tofu, top of funnel, and then the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the funnel is the middle of the funnel. That's mofu, and the bottom of the funnel is bofu, right? So tofu, mofu, bofu, and
Tofu.
DevRel is tofu. Like DevRel is, at least the way we see it, is it's at the very top of the sales funnel. It maybe isn't even a part of the sales funnel, but it's just you have really great relationships, and maybe somebody will go from being completely outside to somewhere in the middle of the funnel, and maybe at the bottom, and maybe they'll convert and become a sale. But it's really just relationships, high quality relationships. You go to people, you tell them, hey, we make this tool, it's there, you may need it, you may not, whatever, but let's have a
Yeah.
relationship anyway, because when you need it, we can support you. And so it's sort of like a promise that may never resolve. And that's why companies are having a hard time. So it's like this investment that does not pay off in the short term. And so
Yeah.
you combine that with the fact that there's two and a half wars happening concurrently and climate change
Yeah.
and we're all going to die, and like the economy is so bad that people are going like, okay, money's bad. This thing is a big investment, and there may be no return, and so let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think that's why usually content and marketing are the first like departments to see layoffs.
So, uh, that is, I would not say that is good news to my ears because obviously we see have more people that want to come into DevRel and all of those. But since you said there's no so much demand, I know there are still some companies that still invest in DevRel. Which of those industries, I think like about last year, 2 years ago, it was Web3. A lot of Web3 companies were hiring for DevRel. So like this year, which of these industries do you think are still showing maybe little demands for DevRel professionals?
I think really there's only one industry that has demand for DevRel professionals, and that's developer tools. So software, and
Mm,
not just software, but software that's intended to be used by developers,
for
right?
developers.
Even like if you think about Web3 and Ethereum and Chain and
Mm-hmm.
Solidity and all of this, like the reason they have DevRel and the reason they pay them a huge amount of money is because they want developers to build on those chains, on those platforms. And so anything that is a platform for developers will need or want DevRel. And so, but
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, that's such a tiny, tiny segment of a market that like developers are a minority. Um, and so that's probably another reason why DevRel isn't as like prevalent as just general software engineering, because with software engineering you can build things for developers, but you can
Mm-hmm.
also just build things. Like you can go work at Volkswagen and make like car engine software to do
Mm-hmm.
diagnostics. This has nothing to do with developers, right? And so
Yeah.
for DevRel, you're catering to an audience that is developers, and that audience is a minority audience. But as an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
the whole world is yours because of the internet. It affects
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, but looking at it this way, in DevRel, we do not just have developer advocates. We have like technical writers, we have community managers, we have open sourcers, and the
Right,
likes
but
like that.
who's the audience though for all of those?
Developers.
Exactly, which is a minority audience, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So, my next question would be for anyone going into DevRel, maybe for people that still want to go into DevRel, what are the most on-demand skills that you think they should have, like with the old 2024 job market and the likes? Like, what do you think should be the on-demand skills they should have now?
yeah, that's a good question. I think let me just say this also that DevRel, like for companies to make profits, I think is what's trending downwards. But I think DevRel as a way to connect with developers shouldn't trend down. And the sad thing about this is for businesses, there's no money here, but also for individuals, oftentimes there is such a thing as just like free and good DevRel that you do for your fellow friends. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
non-profit conferences. I think of like JS Heroes is a conference that is not for profit, and it's just developers teaching other developers about things and having
Mm-hmm.
like good developer relationships. That should not trend down because the motivation there is not money; it's like people's success, right? And I think that's pretty important. So I want to make that distinction. Like DevRel as a job for-profit companies is not as popular as 2021, but DevRel
Mm-hmm.
as an art to connect and teach developers should be common, and that I think is to some degree. Okay, so what skills do you need for that? Um,
Yeah.
I think what definitely the biggest DevRel skill you need is communication. I think no question. Like you should be able to
Communication.
get,
To
yeah, you should be
communicate.
able to get
Yeah.
a point across clearly and also explain things in a way that is just right. What do I mean by just right? Well, you can explain things in a way that's maybe um, too complex and you use big words and you're like, wow, look how smart I am. That's not good. You can also
Yeah.
explain things in a way that's too elementary. Like you're teaching someone a variable and you're like, so a variable, by the way, is a thing that can hold state. And they don't even need that level, right? So getting the level of explanation clear and like
Mm-hmm.
understanding your audience when you
Yeah.
communicate with them is absolutely key. And that should really be the basis of how you communicate with them. And then
Mm-hmm.
just make I think it's very important to communicate clearly. Like one thing I do when I hire for DevRel positions is if they send me a GitHub profile, I go look at the repositories on GitHub and just check the README. Like, what is your README? Is it instructions on how to get this set up? Is it contributing guidelines? Is it actually written by you and not ChatGPT? Or even worse, is it some default like README template, right? And
From
and
me too.
and that is a strong indicator of okay, this person cares about communicating and explaining to developers, which that's a
Mm-hmm.
great sign if your readmes are like high quality. And then I'll go check, I'll use your software, I'll try and break it, I'll cause an error, and then I'll check the status of the errors. Like for the errors, are you actually like reporting good messages, or is it just does it break with some message that I can't read? So I
Great.
think
Yeah.
that skill, all of this is just communication, right? And I think that is the golden skill for DevRel.
Whatever. Yeah. Certainly, because you obviously will be communicating to people and you need them to connect with whatever it is that you're saying.
Yeah, and I think it's not just DevRel. I think that skill. I think the basis of all relationships, so not just developer relationships, but
Mm-hmm.
all human, even animal, of all relationships is communication. Like
Yeah.
you and I will have a good relationship in this conversation if like
Yeah.
what I'm saying is clear to you and what you're saying is clear to me. But if the internet connection's not working, or if there's like background noise and things and we can't hear each other, this will be a poor like interaction, and we
Yeah.
won't actually have a quality like relationship between us in this conversation. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's probably one of the most important life skills, not just DevRel skills.
Yeah. Exactly. Even I feel like aside from even the engineers, if you don't know how to communicate with your manager, or as a customer expert person, you don't know how to communicate with customers, it will really cause a lot of disruptions anyway.
Yeah, and
So
I think it's not
communication is
just,
key.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think it's not just developers. I think everybody. And I think
Everybody, yeah.
this is not a bad thing. It's more an unfortunate thing about the world. It's not bad about the person, because they don't teach you this. Nobody teaches you, like, how do
Yeah.
you be a great communicator, right?
Communicator.
For example, I went to school, and in my school, I learned a whole bunch of nonsense that I don't use today. But I never learned, like, how do you actually communicate with people and have
Communicate.
high quality
Hmm.
relationships, right? And so it's
Hmm.
not their fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just no, we for some reason don't prioritize teaching people this at all. And then we wonder,
Hmm.
like, why are they such a bad communicator? It's because nobody, where could they learn from, you know?
Yeah. So how would you say for someone that is bad? Because we have someone here in the comment that says she's so bad at communicating. So how would you say they should learn how to communicate? How would they learn how to communicate better?
That's a good question. So my good friend Brian Douglas, some people know him as B Dougie. He's the founder and
Hmm.
CEO of a company called Open Source. Um, every year, once a year, he reads a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh,
And he keeps
I
going
think
back
yes, that's it. Yeah,
every
I
year,
think I
and
do.
that book has been very helpful for him. For me, I think it's really just a lot of trial and error. I think everything in
Hmm.
life that we don't have like a good like teaching style for, or
Hmm.
even everything in life that we do have a good sense of learning or teaching materials for, um, it all comes down to attention, effort, and mistakes. I think these three are the
Hmm.
foundation for everything: attention,
Yeah,
effort, and mistakes. So with communication, if you're bad at it, then I think the best way to get better at it is pay
to keep
attention.
doing
Pay
it. Yeah.
attention to your communication. Just pay attention, and you'll start to notice. Oh, I could have said this better. I could have said that better,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
put in effort to fix your communication. And what does that mean though? A lot of people will go like, okay, but where do I put in effort? How do I put in effort? I think when you're paying attention, you'll know exactly how to put in and what
Oh,
effort to put in.
yeah.
So attention and effort are like these friends. And then third is you'll probably make a lot of mistakes as you put in effort, but that's fine.
Hmm.
I actually posted something on X today where it's this meme of like this highly futuristic, like Wakanda style society. And I
Hmm.
said, this is what society will look like if we just practice skills without judgment. And so I think a lot of people trying to get better at communication will make a lot of mistakes. And
Mistakes. Yeah.
the real mistake is when you make a mistake going like, "Oh, that was bad. I'm so bad. I'm not a good communicator." That, like, judging your mistakes is bad. Instead, you could just be like, "Ah, okay, I messed that up. This doesn't affect me at
I
all.
need to get better.
I'm just going to keep doing it." Right?
Yeah.
And that, so those three: attention, effort, and mistakes are like the way. That's actually the way that I
Mhm.
um grew as a communicator a lot. I made so many mistakes. I lost many friends, but the true friends were the ones who were able to forgive me despite my mistakes, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think my own personal experience and journey was this: I paid a lot of attention. I was very aware that I was a very poor communicator. I put in a lot of effort, partly by reading some books and then going
Mhm.
out and practicing the things I read. And when I
Yeah.
was practicing it, I made a lot of mistakes, but in the end I learned from them, and the people that mattered like supported me through the mistakes, and that was really what helped me a lot.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. Thank you very much. So yeah, you mentioned that when you usually hire for devil roles, you tend to look out for people that know how to communicate better in terms of writing, in terms of speaking, all of those. So aside those, what else would you say you look out for as a hiring manager? Maybe the soft skills or the technical skills. Like,
Yeah, I think communication comes under soft skills, and really that's, if I'm being fully honest, that's the soft skill I care about the most. I don't really care about any other soft, like your handwriting. I don't care about what that looks like. But I think communication is extremely important, and of course, as part of communication is also things like empathy and sympathy and all of that. All of that comes under communication, right?
mm-hmm,
But I think what what distinguishes the great from the good in DevRel is also like technical excellence. There's a lot of DevRel or just flat out influencers who I've had the displeasure of working with, where they have like a lot of followers on X, and so
X.
they look like very, great people, and the community says they're great and so on. But I've hired some people with a lot of followers from X, and we've worked together, and I found out, wow, they don't know eh, how to do the job. They have the soft skills, they have the network,
Yeah.
they have the followers,
Yeah.
but whoa, this blog post is I'm surprised. And so I think it's great if you can talk the talk and communicate,
Yeah.
but even better if you can walk it and
Work
talk
it.
it. Whoa, that's an awesome combination. So
No.
like you
Yeah.
can talk, but you can also do. That's
Yeah.
huge. And I think this is what makes like world class famous people world class, like masters. Yeah,
Mhm.
like I think of like a lot of people dislike Gordon Ramsay, the chef. And I honestly don't have anything to say about him specifically as a person, but like he is a, I think, a very strong communicator, like because he's famous and he talks literally for a living. But also like there's all these videos, on the internet and on TV of him like teaching people how to break down a lobster or butcher a chicken or cut a fish and cook it. And so it's this combination of like he can talk very nicely, but he can also do the job. And
Yeah.
I've eaten his food. It's really not good. I don't like Gordon Ramsay's food, but the technical ability to fillet a fish is a technical task. It has nothing to do with taste, right? And so yeah, the ability to communicate but then also execute is super rare. Super, and this is what people say. Um, and I may sound bad saying this. I'm not intending to, but when people say nice things about me, this is the thing they usually say is that, wow, you can talk really great, but also your depth of knowledge is so impressive. And I think that if you can give me someone as a hiring manager who is an excellent communicator and who knows so much about the domain, either
About what they're
code
saying.
or execution, who makes me feel like, whoa, I need to go back to school, I will hire them instantly. Like I'll move mount, I'll do whatever it takes because that's
So
super
higher.
special.
That's. I think that's the balance most people fail to get. They focus on the networking, maybe the community, the brand building, and then they neglect the core skills that will probably get them the role and make them do excellently.
Yeah. Yeah, which for me, I've always been scared. I've always been terrified of like brand building and community and having a lot of followers, but I don't actually know anything. Like this has been a nightmare of mine. I would much rather be great at the work and have zero followers than the other way around. Like have a lot of followers and I don't know what I'm talking about. I think because that seems like a very scary situation to be in, right? You're
Very
constantly like
scary.
thinking about like, oh, do I sound dumb? Oh, am I like revealing
Yeah.
myself? Like you're constantly like looking over your shoulder. It sounds like very
Yeah.
anxiety heavy.
Tedious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think the problem also becomes when maybe because you're popular, people will most likely recommend you for roles. And when they recommend you for roles and you're banking on this person's credibility, how come you don't know these things? It's a lot of work. It's a
Yeah.
lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, my next question is this: what types of questions are usually asked in DevRel interviews? I know most people don't talk about DevRel interviews like that.
Yeah.
Sort
I,
of general questions.
I can tell you what happened in my interview at DataStax.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything stopping me. It was actually the best interview experience I've ever had at any company
Okay.
ever so far. Um, for many reasons. I mean, I think there were quite a few rounds. I think there were 5 rounds or something like this. But in the beginning, it was just a screen just to make sure I'm a real person. Very friendly. Nothing really concrete there. As in, like it was just very like let's. It was a screen. And after that, it was a really great interview with some of the DataStax people and my manager or coach. They call them coaches at DataStax, where I had to create a demo application using DataStax technology and then present it to them. Like build a little demo app and do a presentation, a talk, a 10-minute lightning talk, nothing big. So I had to create it ahead of time and then get on a call and do the talk. And then they would ask me questions based on it, and I would answer. That was actually really fun. Like for me, I love doing this. I would do it for free anyway. And so that was that round. After that, there was another technical round, and then there was a meeting with the chief marketing officer, so the big boss of marketing, Jason. And this round was interesting. Like he would just ask me questions about where we can improve, if what would you do to make it better, and so on. Just a really nice discussion. And from there, I think that was it. So that's what I would do as well. If I was hiring for DevRel, obviously I would do all my background work. So I would ask for links to like GitHub and social media, and I would sort of check them out. Like, what have you been up to, and search for them on YouTube. Like, what talks have you done? Like, really get to know them myself before meeting in an interview. And then when we come to an interview, just ask them questions about the work that they've done. So in your talk, you said this. Tell me more about that, or um, something like that. Can you think of a time when you had conflicts with someone, this kind of thing? And
Yeah.
maybe we'll have them present. So if they don't have any work that's discoverable on YouTube or similar, for me this is already a disadvantage, because especially for DevRel, you'd expect someone to do some presentation at least once somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
right, you've maybe created a demo app, you talked about it, you've done a readme, like there's something public. It doesn't have to be a video, but like a project code, something. And if there's nothing, this is I would say I would consider that a disadvantage. But to even the scale and remove the disadvantage or balance it out by an advantage, I would invite them to just let's create one before the interview, and then come to the interview and present it, right? And that
Exactly.
way,
Yeah.
even if you have nothing before, you could just make one up now, and then we'll talk about it. So that's usually what I would do with the interview process.
Yeah. Okay. That was. I think I've experienced some sort of interviews like that, and yeah, some of them went well, some of them didn't go well.
In the case that they didn't go well, why didn't they go well?
I don't know. Most times they tend to go for people that have more experience, or people that have they be like, oh, you haven't really spoken at so much events, or oh, the event you spoke at is not on YouTube, and we didn't see how you would, just a lot of reasons like that.
But what about interviews where you've had to do a presentation in the interview itself?
And most times after the assessment, they just be like, oh, I'm gonna have with somebody else. I don't even have time to present whatever it is that you built. Yeah. Okay, so my next question would be, what are some of the platforms that you know or resources for finding dev opportunities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember finding. Let me look this up. I remember finding. Um, there was a job board for DevRel. I think it's devrelcareers.com.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
that one, I've always gone there, and I've found, like, I haven't actually used this myself to find a job, but I've used it to find jobs for friends. And some of them have got hired through this. So that's cool. I think that's a great job board. I think also um, devrelx.com is
okay, yeah. I
is
think
a
I know
very
DevRel.
the cool thing about DevRel is it has positions not just in like the United States. There's things in India and fully remote. For example, Zoom, Zoom, the video call company,
Yeah.
is hiring a dev advocate, right? And that's on devrelx.com. So I think that those two are pretty standard.
Yeah.
There's also an account on X called @DevRel Careers. It's a bot,
Okay.
but it posts DevRel jobs every day, every single day, for developer advocates. AWS, for example, there's an AWS developer advocate position at Diagrid that's available. It was posted 3 hours ago, right? So like,
Yeah. Okay.
it's very up to date.
Okay. I'll check all of those out and link it for people that would need it.
I
Yeah.
just think it's
So
important to, like, for people getting into DevRel, I think it's really
yeah.
important to recognize it's a big responsibility, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's a young job field, and we get to make it be something that is either applauded or shut down. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, what do I mean by that? Like, we could, like, based on, like, we could get jobs as DevRel people and truly excel. And by excel, I mean, like, we identify what does the business want from me in this job, how can I
Mm-hmm.
get it, and then we get it for them and we do it well. um,
Mm-hmm.
or we can lead to DevRel dying by the opposite, right? We just like we come into the job and we take it for granted and we just try. So there was, um, it's quite unfortunate. The founder of AG Grid recently passed away. He was a friend of mine, Niall, and he had a really hard time hiring for DevRel for many years. And I asked him why, and he said, "Dude, every time we hire for DevRel, people join us, and then they like just end up going to very expensive events and having a lot of parties, and then nothing happens for our business." And I was very sad to hear that. But this happens in DevRel. And I think this is why DevRel has a declining reputation, is because a lot of folks take it for granted and don't actually use it to build high quality relationships with developers and teach them
Yeah.
skills that they need, and teach about the products that they represent, right? So I think it's very important for somebody getting into DevRel and taking one of these jobs that they do it very well. I think we can also like sometimes overcorrect for this, where we do that too much. So the other mistake
Yeah.
in DevRel is like, if you're a developer advocate at AWS, then you're constantly like, your whole identity is AWS. You wear an AWS
AWS.
cap, an AWS shirt, and like you can't talk about anything other than AWS. This is also a mistake
AWS.
because then people in the community don't actually feel like they can relate to you. Now, if
Yeah.
they want help with AWS, sure, they know to come to you, but that's not the goal. The goal with DevRel is not to make more AWS. Well, actually, this is maybe wrong what I'm saying, but I think, put it this way: the whole goal of DevRel is not to reinforce existing customers and developers, but is also to gather new relationships, right? And so if you're the AWS person who's constantly only always AWS, then great, you'll
Yeah.
service all the AWS developers, but you may fail at converting like other
New
like
customers.
Fly.io,
Yeah.
Vercel, Cloudflare developers as well. And that's also part of your job, right? Is to play in the broad like serverless space, not just the AWS space.
So that means at the same time you're representing AWS, but at the same time you're also representing the whole developer community. Show up for them when they need you, not just representing your company alone, because that might just brand you as an identity. Oh, this is an
Yeah,
AWS person. Yeah.
exactly. And it's important to help your company achieve dominance, right? As DevRel, among developers, like that's the whole point. Is like, for example, I think there's somewhat healthy competition between things like Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare, maybe AWS. Very light competition, right? I think the more fierce competition is between Vercel and Netlify. But as a developer advocate, I think it's very important to help your company get as many competitive advantages as it can and achieve dominance in a sort of broadening way. So maybe you achieve dominance in your little like three company competition, but then you go one level up, and suddenly it's a broader set where there's now 8 companies and then 15 companies. And what does that mean? So like Vercel is very specific. It's like you deploy websites with usually
Yeah.
Next.js or some framework to their platform. That's it.
Yeah.
You cannot deploy Docker containers, for example. So if you're DevRel at Vercel, you think about making Vercel dominant in its very niche space first, which is just deploying
Yeah.
websites and web apps. But once it has that dominance, or it's close to that dominance, then you go like, okay, now let's zoom out a little bit. Where is Vercel positioned, or where's my company positioned relative to the companies that host containers like Fly.io, AW? Where are we? And then once you identify where you are, it's your responsibility to help your company dominate that sector. And then
Sector.
okay, so then you dominate also in areas where they host containers. Awesome. Now you're like really known. You go one level up. Okay, who are we competing with now? And it's usually a broader and broader set of companies until you emerge as like a true superpower. And this is usually when you raise a big Series D, E, or IPO or something like this. And so I think you've got to continue broadening your company's dominance among developers as well. And by dominance, I don't mean like big dictatorship, but I mean if I say if I say a keyword, if I say deployment, what are the top 3 companies that come to your mind, right? And if the
Yeah.
company that you work for is not there, then you have work to
You
do.
have a lot of work to do. Yes, that's awesome. So the next question is: aside from regular job boards that you mentioned, Are there any other ways, maybe unconventional ways that you can find DevRel roles? Because I know applications these days are tedious. Your application may never even get to the table of your hiring manager with the level of competition outside. So do you think there are some unconventional ways that you can get DevRel roles?
I think perhaps the best unconventional way is to just be absolutely excellent and do a lot of open source. That's I think that's really it. Like if you're truly good, like mastery, then there's no way that people cannot pay attention to you, right? Um, and then if that work is public, meaning if you're an open source, you've got some project, then people will see and people will notice, and then the companies come to you. That's definitely unconventional. The convention is what? You go to university, you study, you apply to a job, you get it, or you get an internship, and you get, that's I think unconventional is to truly achieve mastery. And I think it's possible for, we talked earlier about attention and effort and
Yeah,
mistakes. You can apply that to anything, DevRel, software engineering, sports, hockey, whatever, and you will get there. It's just a matter of time and consistency. And I think that's really the way. I think um, what I really don't like are shortcuts and cheat codes because they don't
yeah,
last. Like, so for example, I think a lot of people will think one unconventional way to get a good DevRel job is to network very heavily. So go to a lot of conferences, talk to a lot of people, um, and then shoot them a DM on Twitter like, "Hey, are you hiring? I want it." Um, and then maybe you'll interview, maybe you'll even get it. But how long will you last in that position?
last. Yeah,
Right? Do you actually have what it takes? One, and two, are you going to reflect bad? Are you going to make the person who referred you regret it? There, like that comes with so much pressure. Where if you don't actually have the skills, you're in trouble. Now, you could do a blend of them, right? You could achieve maybe not mastery, but you could be good where you're like, I'm good enough, and then network, and then have just a really honest conversation with the person. Like, hey, I maybe don't have the right skills, but I want this job. What do you
yeah.
think? That could work. Um, I don't think that's necessarily unconventional, though. That's just like talking to people. I will say
People.
this: Rachel Neighbors is a really good friend of mine. I recommend having them on the show if you haven't yet. And they've worked at Meta, Mozilla, Microsoft, Amazon, um, and they said that every job they ever got was from a Twitter direct message DM. And so good for them. The cool thing is they also, I know for sure they had the skills required for the position, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like they would have also just got the job if they applied. It was just more fast track because of the referral.
Yeah.
Um, so that maybe, I don't think it's necessarily unconventional if you know the people to ask, but um, yeah, I fail to see that as like unconventional because I think that like asking your friends is very
Yeah.
conventional, but that's also one
Conventional,
way.
yeah. So the most unconventional way is just to put yourself out there, do a ton of projects, a ton of meaningful projects, a ton of meaningful work, and when people notice, they'll definitely want you in their team.
Yeah, but doing that with a high level of mastery, I think, is key. Because if you just put yourself out there, then you sort of end up like with everybody else who's also just putting themselves out there, who hasn't
Yeah.
devoted the same amount of time to mastery, and then you make it even harder to select you, right? Because you're literally a drop in the ocean. Um, but if you spend most of your time studying, practicing, rehearsing, building, showing your friends, what do you use this? Going to a senior developer, like if in case you're not yet senior, going to a senior, going like, hey, is this going to work? Can we stress test it? Can we break it? And you really, I can't overemphasize the value of hard work. It's I think it's really unconventional. I think hard work and mastery is unconventional because a lot of us are
Unconventional,
just
yeah.
not willing to do hard work anymore. A lot of us are just like, you know what, this is too hard. Is there a Can I press a button and get a job? But I found that in my experience, when you really like have to work hard for something, when you get the thing, it's so much better than when you get it with little
Yeah.
effort. And so yeah, I think the unconventional way is really just hard work.
Yeah. Someone wants to be when you work very hard for something, you know, real value of it. Doesn't mean that when you get it easy, it's not good. But when you really work hard for it, dedicate your time, devote your time, you feel this sense of accomplishment that, oh, you really did this.
Yeah. And there's a lot of medical. So I grew up in hospitals with doctors. I have really bad health. And there's a lot of medical literature and research on the relationship between effort and reward, meaning getting something for your effort. And it's very consistent that when you get something for little or no effort, usually this leads you to depression and addiction and anxiety. Like nothing good happens. Like if you don't work hard and get a lot of rewards constantly, you just end up being a sad, miserable person, and you don't know why. And I think we're seeing a lot of this actually in like the United States, in society today, like where we really like value comfort very highly.
Yeah.
The United States has the highest amount of prescription medication in the country is antidepressants. Everybody's depressed because everybody's very comfortable, and they're not, and they value that comfort. And I think
Yeah.
that's a real problem. We've just lost hard work,
Hard
and
work.
so I
Yeah.
think that's the real unconventional way.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think my next question is, what advice would you give to people that want to transition into DevRel? Either they are technical, maybe coming from a software engineering background, or maybe not too technical, say from a product management background or technical writing background. What would you say to them?
Yeah. Um, I think, just if I can sort of finish that thought on hard work before I get to this. I think
Okay.
one more important thing about hard work is I grew up with a lot of people telling me, like teachers in school and stuff, going like, you have to work hard, you have to work hard. But that doesn't work. It didn't work for me because I didn't know why. Like they never told me
Right. Yeah.
work hard so you can achieve X or Y. You know, just like just do it. That's our culture. You have to work
Just
hard.
work hard.
And I was like, but for what? And so now that I'm much older, I understand, okay, I'm really good at my job because I did work hard for it when I was younger. And I worked hard because I couldn't rest until I knew something deeply, you know, and I'm still like that. Like, so right now when I have some free time, I play, I play a video game called Fortnite. It's extremely challenging to me. I'm not skilled at all. And it bothers me. It bothers me a lot, to the point where I spend way too much time failing at this, like intentionally. I keep paying attention, I keep putting in effort, I keep making mistakes, and I keep getting better. But I just can't be, there's certain things in this life that I cannot be bad at for whatever reason, that I work hard at to, and then when I get good, I get good. So all that to say, it's important to know why to work hard as well. Okay, so coming to your actual question, I apologize for the
Yeah.
sidetrack.
No,
um
that's no addition.
if somebody wanted to transition to DevRel, I think it depends on where they're coming from. If they're a product person, I think they need to raise their development skills. DevRel is in the name, right? To speak to developers fluently, you have to be a developer. I really believe that. Like for example, customer relations. It's very close to developer relations. Actually, they're the same. It's just with developer relations, your customers are developers. So
Developers.
really, customer relations, developer relations, same thing. And so in customer relations, if you want to be truly great at customer relations, for example, if you're an Apple customer relations specialist in the iPhone department, then you really have to know a lot
No,
about
about
the iPhone,
iPhone.
you
Yeah.
know. And so for somebody wanting to move into DevRel, let's say for a database product, DevRel for Supabase, right? um, if you know nothing about Postgres, you're going to have a bad time. That's like Supabase's main product. So I
Yeah.
would, the very important thing is, one, identify like what you want to do DevRel for, and then make sure you know that thing. Yes, also from a technical perspective, but also from a non-technical perspective. So I can tell you non-technically that Postgres is a database that models relationships between things. That's the non-technical description. I think anybody, like even my mother, will understand that. But I can also then tell you the technical side of Postgres is that it stores data in a normalized way in tables and columns, and supports foreign key relationships, and is queryable with SQL. Like that's more technical. And so like being able to balance the technical and non-technical knowledge of the thing you want to do DevRel for is absolutely key. And so for the product people wanting to become DevRel, I think they need to bias more towards the technical side of things, because product people usually also have really good communication, just because that's what you need for
Yeah.
doing product work.
Yeah.
But if it's developers who want to move into DevRel, then the other way, then bias not towards the technical stuff, but towards the communication, right? So
Mm-hmm.
where you're coming from matters. And where you're coming from is usually lacking in one of communication or technical understanding. And you just have to
Yeah.
do a balancing
Oh,
act.
sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You just have to do a
Okay.
balancing act.
Okay, so for some DevRel rules, some DevRel rules require you to maybe make demos and build products like that, build like demos of their products. While some of them are community focused, they just want you to come in and do the community part. Some of them want you to come in and maybe do documentation. So, if now that we've divided it, do you still think all these things you said before applies?
Yeah. Because if you're writing documentation, then you have to write about the details, like the technical details of things. Like if you're writing the documentation for React, you have to explain how use state works.
Yeah.
You have to like write code and then explain that code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
Yes.
you need to take literally technical code and then move it to plain English, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Sometimes you need to take plain English and move it to code. You
Move
need
it
to
to
be able to smoothly navigate the spectrum between this is code, this is an English explanation, and you need to be able to walk that line, no matter what, whether you're just a technical writer or the person implementing the algorithm. If you're DevRel, you have to be able to do both.
that works. That works. Okay, I think I have one more question to go before we call it a day. Okay, so for I know most people in DevRel, after a while, some of them decide to go back to course on software engineering, while some of them choose to go do other things. What do you think are the realistic career path for people in DevRel? Say, if I'm leaving DevRel, where next do I go? Or say I want to go a step higher.
Yeah, this is an excellent question. um, I think it depends on what you like. Like let's look at some data of real people who left DevRel, and where did
Mm-hmm.
they end up, right? I think of I think the greatest person in DevRel history to me is Sarah Drasner, who's the VP of Client Engineering at Google. Sarah is just unbelievable, and she started. She was an engineer, and then she did DevRel for a long time. She was VP of DevRel at Netlify, and then later went to join Google. So Sarah was an engineer, then developer relations engineer, so DevRel, and then went back to well, maybe not back to engineering, but went to be a VP of engineering. So it's still engineering, but engineering leadership, right?
Really,
And so
yeah.
it's a really great place to be. And I will say this: Sarah is the absolute best in being like technical DevRel. And I don't mean this to say that non-technical DevRel is bad, but Sarah was like constantly creating these excellent code demos and still does that. So if you look at the stuff that Sarah creates, right? And just a reminder, Sarah is responsible for google.com search, Android, Gmail, Google, like all the stuff that we
Uh,
use every day. She's
every
this
day.
Yes, she's the VP responsible for that. And so she creates these beautiful graphics, about how Android works, like in depth. Like this is what the OS is doing, and this is how the device APIs work, and so on and so forth. And so she deeply understands that side of Android because it's her job. So where does she go from DevRel? She went to engineering leadership, that is VP of engineering at Google, but still fundamentally does uses those DevRel skills to create explainer
Yeah.
documents, and also the skill of communication. I mean, she's coordinating literally, I think, thousands of engineers across Android teams, Google.com teams, Gmail teams, etc., and really having to communicate with them, but also facilitate their communication with each other, right? So these skills from DevRel come in handy, and I think that's a really great next step. If we look at Kelsey Hightower, another just absolute pillar in the space of DevRel,
DevRel.
is
Yeah.
now retired. So he was DevRel, I think, his entire life, and is now retired, and so not actively working, but is still doing talks and things. And
Yeah.
so that you could just be DevRel your entire career and then retire. But that's where some people are. For me, I definitely don't even consider myself in the same league as those folks. But I was an engineer, then an engineering manager, then a DevRel manager. Now I'm just a developer advocate or developer relations engineer. I
Yeah.
think it really depends on what you want. And thankfully, in this industry, we're privileged enough to have choice. So
Yeah.
it's really just I think it's what you want. And for me, I tend to prefer doing more engineering. So I like writing code. I like building software, and so I'm moving more in that direction. But I think really what's next is what you like. If you want to be strategic about it, then I will say there's definitely more money in engineering or engineering leadership. I think DevRel does have a ceiling, unless you're in Web3. That's a different, like Nader Dabit is, swimming in cash probably, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, I think so. For me, I would move to either engineering or engineering leadership.
Okay. That's awesome. I know I said one last question, but this is like the very, very last question. With all that we've discussed so far, do you still think people that want to come into DevRel, they should still have a go ahead, or they should abort the mission and look for alternatives?
I think it depends on what they want. If they want to travel for free and attend a lot of parties on their company's expense, um, they can do that. I don't know that that will last very long. But if they want to sort of follow in the footsteps of the great Sarah Drasner, right, and like um, create software that is impactful and
Mm-hmm.
continue to do so, I think it's great. I really think it's just about what you want. Um, and so like I'll tell you this, I got into DevRel because I got into speaking at conferences because I thought, oh cool, I get to travel for free and explore.
Yeah.
It's a lie. It's not. You don't get to travel at all. Like you go somewhere, but you spend the first day there freaking out about your talk. You spend the second day giving your talk. You spend the
So
third day sort of just like deflating from
trying to live.
all the
Yeah.
interaction, and then the fourth day you leave. So you don't actually. So that's maybe not true. I think fundamentally, if somebody wants to grow their skills of communication and engineering, and get paid while they do it, and also help a huge amount of developers. If they want to actually help people and teach them things like Cloudflare or whatever, then I think they should absolutely go for it. But I think they have to
Okay.
go for it with the right mindset.
Mindset.
With the
Yeah.
mindset of I need the main skill is communication, and I need to be able to walk this line between technical and non-technical perfectly. And they have to be willing to grow in that, right? I think if that's all there, then sure, go for it. But I think it's also worth
Yeah.
like a little bit of caution that the job market
Mm-hmm.
is really bad, and DevRel in particular is not good at this point in time. So, in the scenario that resources are somewhat scarce, I would suggest maybe just go with the the first thing you get. And I think it is more common or more likely to find an engineering job than a DevRel job, again because developers are a minority audience versus everybody needs engineering. Like there's a Sony camera here and there's probably some engineer that's working on the like
One day.
autofocus.
Yeah.
So engineering is probably easier to get into than DevRel, but if you have a passion for teaching communication, then I think DevRel is a great choice.
Different. Yeah. Thank you so very much. And think this is the end. Have exhausted all my questions and
Great.
you answered everything. So thank you for coming onto our webinar once again.
Great.
And I hope everybody has been able to like pick because I really have a lot that I've written down. So thank you so much.
My
And
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
yeah, bye.
Goodbye.
Let me end the stream.